right. You see, that was painless, and it was quick. You can just call me the dentist of radio. I promise this won't hurt a bit. You just feel a little pinprick. Commercials are a necessary evil in radio because radio is the only medium to you that is actually still free. You know why radio is the heart of free speech in the country? When every other media outlet and format for media is owned by six major corporations, there's actually about 8, but 6 majors. And by the way, Time Warner and AOL are about to merge, and I'm not AOL, Time Warner and Comcast are about to merge, knocking that down from 6 to 5. And by the way, both parties, as I spoke about earlier, are dead silent on this issue. Nobody wants to touch it. They're all willing to allow it to happen. Just goes to prove that it'll be 5 companies that are in charge of indoctrination of you, not 6, and it will only take another couple of months before that's accomplished. The FCC is not stopping it, even though they have an obligation to. And again, a monopoly of 5 is no more beneficial to you than a monopoly of 1, especially if they're all colluding. And don't make any mistake and think News Corp is not part of that, the parent company of Wall Street Journal and Fox Business and Fox News and all the rest of that. Make no mistakes about it, ladies and gentlemen. They are mainstream media. I know they couch themselves as something other than that, but don't be fooled. I'm not throwing everybody under the bus in Fox News. I'm just saying that there's a lot of stuff they won't talk to you about because they're told not to talk to you about it. Hello? Now, the Federal Election Commission has warned publicly, he's whistleblowing, ladies and gentlemen, that the conservative media, and he specifically mentions Drudge Report and Sean Hannity's program, they face regulation. Government officials reacting to the growing voice of conservative news outlets, especially on the internet, are angling to curtail the media's exemption from federal election laws governing political organizations, a potentially chilling intervention that the chairman of the FEC is vowing to fight. Now, for the record, Chairman Goodman, Lee Goodman, he's currently the chairman. Let me tell you how the FEC works. There are 6 members. They have to, and their rules are amazing. First of all, the chairman and the vice chairman cannot be from the same political party. You want me to show you how they have made sure that the 2-party system is alive and well and kept alive? Here's how the FEC works. The chairman and the vice chairman have to be from opposite parties. All the other members have to be from opposite parties, and you can't have more than half of the FEC from one party or the other. In other words, you can't have 4 Republicans and 2 Democrats or vice versa. How about saying you can't have more than 3 of the FEC commissioners from any party? How's that? But we don't want that. How about saying that you can only have members of the commission who are not aligned or a participant in any party? How about saying that when you have 6 members and a chairman, that out of those 6 people that are members of or commission members, that not more than 1 of them can be from each party? Well, that would require 6 parties. Hello? You want fairness? That's fairness. Everything else is propaganda. Now, in this case, Lee Goodman is speaking out, and I applaud his statement, but recognize something. He's elected, every year they elect a new chairman. His role as chairman ends in 2015. Now he won't leave, but he will no longer be chairman. And here's what he has to say. And by the way, kudos to you, Mr. Goodman. I'm applauding what you're doing. I think that there are impulses in the government every day to second guess and look into the editorial decisions of conservative publishers, warns Federal Election Commissioner Chairman Lee E. Goodman in an interview. The right has begun to break the left's media monopoly, particularly through new media outlets like the internet. And I sense that some on the left are starting to rethink the breadth of the media exemption and internet communications. Ladies and gentlemen, that statement, specifically that second paragraph, is world-shaking to you, and it is confirmation that we are making a difference. I want you to hear it again. The right has begun to break the left's media monopoly, particularly through new, alternative media outlets like the internet, aka this program. And I sense that some on the left are starting to rethink the breadth of the media exemption and internet communications. The only problem I have with that entire statement is that media doesn't have an exemption. It's called the First Amendment. And you don't have to be in the media to have it. There is no exemption for free speech. There is no exemption for you being able to speak your mind, address, redress, and expose what's wrong with your government. I know that I tread daily on very dangerous ground. I know that my words will one day be used against me, to harm me, because I say what needs to be said. And I'm unwilling to be silent in the face of tyranny. I know that for all intents and purposes, I'm standing in an enclosure with hungry tigers, completely surrounded. And I'm defenseless. And I realize that at some point, it's likely that this program will be used to injure me personally. Perhaps physically, perhaps legally, perhaps financially. I don't know. I mean, I already know that it has been in many ways, financially and professionally and other ways. But it's my obligation because, you see, I don't really have an alternative here. I'm not a 20-something. I'm not even a 30-something. I'm not even a 40-something. And I have only one duty and one obligation for the remainder of my natural life. And that is to make sure that I hand on the torch of liberty and freedom to those who have come after me. That's my only duty. I didn't serve my country in the military. I do construe and consider what I do now serving my nation. Because I got to tell you, while I may not be under physical fire of bullets yet, and I emphasize the word yet, I have to tell you that I've no doubt in my mind that I am in grave danger. And I don't mean that in a some kind of a haphazard or cavalier way. I mean, I realize that I'm in danger. Danger from, a host of different things. Could be that I would be accused of terroristic threats. It could be an IRS audit. It could be any one of 100 things. I've already paid significant price. But I consider it my duty and I consider it my obligation to speak out. I intend to be the new media outlet. Not solely, I'm not giving myself false crowns here. But I'm a part of something that these people are desperate to get under control. The article, which is in the Washington Examiner, by the way, and there will be a link to it posted in this YouTube video. Just look in the comments or the description section. I don't know why I always have trouble with that. Look in the description section. There'll be a link to these articles. There's two of them, actually, both of them in the Washington Examiner. Noting the success of sites like the Drudge Report, Goodman said that protecting conservative media, especially those on the internet, quote, matters to me because I see the future going to the democratization of media largely through the internet. They can compete with the big boys now. And I have seen storm clouds that the second you start to regulate them, the way he words that, it doesn't make total sense. They can compete with the big boys now, and I have seen storm clouds that the second you start to regulate them, period. I don't understand what he meant by that, but you get the gist. There is at least the possibility, or indeed proclivity, for selective enforcement. So we need to keep the media free and the internet free. All media has long benefited from an exemption from FEC rules. No, media has always benefited from the natural and God-given right of free speech. The creation of the FEC does not override your right to free speech, whether you're in the media or not. The article says, all media has long benefited from an exemption from FEC rules, thereby allowing outlets to pick favorites in elections and to promote them without any limits or disclosure requirements like political action committees. But Goodman cites several examples where the FEC has considered regulating conservative media, including Sean Hannity's radio show and Citizen United's movie division. Those efforts to lift the media exemption died in split votes at the politically evenly divided board, often with Democrats being the ones seeking the regulation. Liberals over the years have also pushed for a change in the Federal Communications Commission's fairness doctrine to cut off conservative voices. And retired Supreme Court Justice John Paul Stevens has recently delighted Democrats with a proposed constitutional amendment that some say could force the media to stop endorsing candidates or promoting issues. Quote, the picking and choosing has started to occur, says Chairman Goodman. There are some in this building that think we can actually regulate media, added Goodman, a Republican whose chairmanship lasts through until the end of December. And if that occurs, says Goodman, quote, then I am concerned about disparate treatment of conservative media. Truth be told, I want conservative media to have the same exemption as all other media. Well, let's understand something. You see, the worst enemy we have to our liberty and freedom and our First Amendment right and our Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, Second Amendment, Eighth, 10th, is actually these people who believe that they can regulate away your right. Now, I don't want to, accuse Chairman Goodman of that, because I don't know that that's what he meant. But the implication is that someone in the FEC has that right, which is basely wrong. There was a recent editorial in the Washington Examiner, which I will also include in the description section of this YouTube video. Freedom of speech in the press took 2 steps forward and 1 back today, on Tuesday. This was published on May 7th. The good news came from Wisconsin, where U.S. District Court Judge Rudolph Randa put an end to the infamous John Doe investigation unleashed last year by vengeful Democrats against the political activist Eric O'Keefe, the Wisconsin chapter of Club for Growth, and 28 other conservative political groups. Led by Milwaukee County Attorney John Chisholm, Special Prosecutor Francis Schmitz, and 3 others, The defendants used police state tactics to gather evidence of alleged campaign finance crime and slapped a gag order on O'Keefe and the other targets to prevent them from telling anybody but their lawyers about what was happening. The crime that O'Keefe and the others were alleged to have committed was taking positions shared by Governor Scott Walker during his 2012 recall election campaign, and creating issue ads that advocated those positions to voters. The Democrats claimed that those ads constituted illegal campaign coordination under Wisconsin law. In a ringing 26-page opinion, Judge Randa disagreed, stating that the Democrats were improperly, quote, rendering the plaintiffs a subcommittee of the Friends of Scott Walker and requiring that money spent on such speech be reported as an in-kind campaign contribution. This interpretation is simply wrong, added Randa. He also went on to state that had the Democrats succeeded in the case, it would mean that, quote, any individual or group engaging in any kind of coordination with a candidate or a campaign would risk forfeiting their right to engage in political speech. Now, what they're basically saying here is that if you engaged in political speech that was allied with a candidate that you agreed with, and you advanced a parallel or similar position, even if that candidate wasn't the inventor of the idea, that you are a campaign contributor by default. I mean, how insane is that? So what you're saying is that only the politician can have the idea and no one else can support it because that would amount to an illegal campaign contribution? Ladies and gentlemen, how insane is that? So if you agree, does that make everyone who agrees with the pastor in the pulpit? I mean, where does that end? And who will be the person who makes the decisions to enforce this? You see, like all laws passed now, everything is subjective to discretion. And anytime the word discretion comes in, you can substitute it for tyranny. Or substitute the word discretion with tyranny. Because discretion means that law is no longer objective. It's no longer cast that it applies to all. It only applies to whomever is the target of that person, that individual who owns the discretion, their venom, whether that be on the left or the right. The article goes on to say that, unfortunately, the steps taken in the nation's capital on the same day were in the opposite direction. Washington Examiner's Paul Bedard reported, and that was the other article we just discussed, that the Federal Election Commission chairman, Lee Goodman's warning that there are impulses in the government every day to second-guess and look into editorial decisions of conservative publishers. There have already been several proposals before the FEC to regulate conservative media outlets. The proposals were defeated, but only because the FEC is evenly split between Republicans and Democrats, and the Democrats voted for the proposals. Goodman diplomatically observed that he has, quote, seen storm clouds, that the second you start to regulate them, there is at least the possibility or indeed the proclivity for selective enforcement. So we need to keep the media free and the internet free. Using government power to gag political opponents would be the inevitable end result of an FEC move to regulate conservative media. Such regulation would likely be justified by proponents as being in the public interest. That's why the regulation would quickly spread from the FEC to other federal agencies as politicians and bureaucrats across the government suddenly discovered that criticism of their programs and policies, quote, harm the public interest. You see, that's the equivalent of the old Sedition Act that was the cause of Jefferson and Madison to come out and say, hey, we believe in nullification. You can pass that in Washington, D.C., but it only applies in that 10 square miles. You can't pull that nonsense off over here. We're not going to follow the law, and we're not going to enforce it. Remember sedition? The Sedition Act? You remember what that one was? If you criticize the president, you could be thrown in prison. Ladies and gentlemen, the communists of the world, the totalitarians of the world, the fascists of the world, they've taken that to heart and they've employed it in every country that is under domination. Hello? By the way, that was John Adams who did that. He later recanted it, but that's beside the point. I mean, it was treasonous. The article closes with, the temptation to abuse such power would be irresistible to members of both political parties. You ain't kidding. But the present reality is that Democrats look like the party most likely to succumb. Sooner or later, Democrat leaders must decide if they are friends or enemies of the First Amendment. Last Wednesday, a 3-judge panel of the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals for the 7th District issued a stay of Judge Randa's order, pending further deliberation of the case. So here's the long and the short of it, folks. And by the way, this isn't limited only to the FEC. They're just applying the pressure on every facet of the diamond simultaneously. You remember Chuck Schumer's idea and Feinstein's idea to license journalists? Hello, what do you think that is? It's the same thing. The demonization of free speech is, for all intents and purposes, you see, that's why the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the first 10 amendments to the Constitution that formed the Bill of Rights, that's why they were written in the order they were written. And they were written in that way, in that order, for a very clear and specific reason. Before you could turn to the gun in the Second Amendment to preserve and save your nation, you had to have the ability to speak out so that you could handle it and resolve it peacefully. That was your ability to engage in free speech. That was your ability to redress your grievances with your government. That was your ability to assemble so that you would be able to rally others to your cause and say, we as a collective group own the government, and the government should not be doing things that are against our best interest. So what do we collectively as a group do to resolve the problem? How else do you collectively get together and say, we need to take this person out of the election cycle? If you don't have free speech and you cannot assemble and you cannot redress your grievances with your government that way, then you must resort to the Second Amendment. That was the whole premise. That's why they were in the order they're in. Everyone wants to assemble and resolve a situation peacefully. You do that with the First Amendment. When the First Amendment fails, you turn to the Second Amendment. Everything else comes after that. Did you notice? That's why it was written in the order it was written in. Don't think they were just randomly chunked in there. They weren't. Have you noticed that your right to not incriminate yourself in the Fifth Amendment comes after the Fourth Amendment, your right to preserve your privacy and to not be searched and seized and your goods seized without a warrant? Have you noticed that the Sixth Amendment right that guarantees you a trial by a jury is after the Fifth Amendment that says you can't be forced to incriminate yourself at the point of a gun? Have you noticed that the Eighth Amendment against cruel and unusual punishment follows the Sixth because it's already assumed that you've legally had a jury trial? Get it? And then the wrapper for the whole thing, the umbrella for the whole thing, is the 10th Amendment that says whatever we haven't addressed in these 9 previous Bills of Rights, those rights are left to the states and or the people. Folks, it was a complete package, and it cannot be segmented, separated, isolated, chopped up, compartmentalized. You can't do any of those things with it. It's one package. We're going to wrap. Our next segment is going to address the fact that we need a national ombudsman program to address these problems. People who are not, 1, hired and paid for by government money, and 2, don't have anyone in government that they answer to. They have to answer directly to we the people, and I'm going to outline a plan for you in just a moment. Do not miss this segment. And when you get this, if you're watching this on video or you're listening to it on a podcast, it is imperative that you share this with everyone. Let's get this as a movement moving forward. I don't have to be the head of it, but let's make sure that we're instituting accountability right. Email me at mike@americasvoicenow.org. That's mike@americasvoicenow.org. Visit our website at americasvoicenow.org and find out more. We'll be right back. You're listening to America's Voice Now.